Welcome back to As Good As Gold podcast by Hugo Save. Today I've invited Keon here, right, to talk about trusts and why we should start thinking, even as young people, we should start thinking about trusts. Keon, welcome to the As Good As Gold podcast. What do you do in your day job?
Well, Raymond, thank you very much for having me. My name is Keon Chee. I am the Executive Director of Riverside Trustees. We are a licensed trust company. We work with families and businesses who are concerned that they may have a certain amount of money that their beneficiaries cannot receive in a lump sum.
So are trustees regulated in Singapore? Are you regulated?
Oh yeah, we are regulated by the Monetary Authority of Singapore. We are considered a licensed financial institution.
Tell us a little bit, how did the concept of trusts come about?
Sometimes people ask, well, what is a trust? Do we need a trust? If I'm a family and I got 2 young children, then the very simple question is, if I pass away, can my young children receive a lump sum? If the answer is no, then a trust may be considered. So what a trust will do is to hold back the monies so that the monies can be staggered over a period of time for the upkeep of the children.
Why do so few people have one or even know about it?
Oh, fantastic. The reason is that there is this myth that trusts are expensive and they are only meant for the high net worth. And what we're trying to dispel those myths. We are trying to bring the cost of the trust down, and we're also trying to say that you do not have to be high net worth in order to get a trust. And so when you talk about a trust to people, they will always say, oh, but Keon, I don't have so much money, just like you, Raymond. I don't have so much money, and you know what? I don't think my situation is complicated enough to have a trust. And that's what we're trying to do. We're trying to show that a trust doesn't have to cost much, and it can be set up in a very simple way. So if I give you an example about how a trust is set up, first of all, I am, let's say, 50 years old. I have my 2 young children, and I'm going to look after them. And so what I want to do is I want to put, say, $1 million into a receptacle to safeguard the funds. Now, this receptacle is probably a special sort of bank account. I'm going to put $1 million into the bank account and get someone called a trustee to look after the money for the benefit of my children. Now, the assumption here is that once I put the money in, I'm no more in the picture. So imagine now you're working in Singapore, you have CPF funds. So the CPF board legally owns our monies, looks after our monies for our benefit. We are the CPF owners. So can you, Raymond, for example, go to CPF board and say, I demand to have my money? No, you cannot.
I can, but I might not get what I want.
That's a good point, because there are rules and regulations behind the setting up. So this is what a settlor does. I'm the parent, I'm the settlor, I'm going to settle $1 million to a trust, and I'm going to leave instructions to someone called the trustee. Dear trustee, hang on to this money, please invest it, and over a period of time, give those monies to my children who are merely 5 years old and 10 years old. Trusts do not exist all over the world. It happened during the Crusades, and during the Crusades, for example, I needed to go fight, and let's say I'm British.
Right.
I go on to fight in the Crusades, and when I fight, I need to call my neighbor John. Say, John, when I'm away, can you please look after my farm, look after my animals? So in other words, I'm now transferring legal ownership to my neighbor, so that by the time I come home, I'm going to ask my neighbor, John, I didn't die during the crusade. May I have my farm and animals back?
Right.
Now, it all worked fine if John would have given it back to me. But along the way, some people said, no, you gave me the legal ownership of the asset. I'm not going to give it back to you. So this is how a trust originated. Because it came to be that it wasn't fair, it wasn't, the word they would use as equitable, for John to keep owning the asset. And at that point in time, that's how we split the ownership of an asset into 2 types. Who owns the asset legally and who owns the asset beneficially. So John can own the asset legally to manage the farm and animals according to my intentions, but he has to do it for my benefit. So it cannot be that after I come back from the Crusades, he's going to say, no, I'm sorry, Keon, you gave it all to me.
Right.
So that's how
and I ate one of
started.
your cows.
And He ate one of my cows, and maybe he got a little bit too friendly with my wife. I don't know.
Whoa. Whoa.
I don't know. Yeah.
In Singapore, right? Why do people buy into trusts?
So we have an aging population where we're not producing enough.
Mm-hmm.
So we have families where they have a great amount of wealth and they have children, and their main concern is that they may not want to give these monies to their children all at once. Now in Singapore, unfortunately too, we have a situation where divorce rates are very high. So imagine, Raymond, your children are now in their 20s, your daughter is about to get married, and you have a few million, let's say, right? And you're now...
I wish.
Well, he will, trust me. And you're concerned now that what if you give the sums to your daughter? It can be monies, it can be properties. What if your daughter somehow divorces? Could that property be a matrimonial asset subject to division? So people are thinking more and more about that. But that said, the beauty of what we're trying to do here is that trusts are not just for the high net worth. Trusts are meant for everyone, every family. And what we're trying to do at Riverside is to say, you don't have to be a millionaire to get a trust. So we're trying to reduce the cost of a trust so that it can be available to just about everyone in Singapore. You can, for example, say, I want my mother to be the trustee, I want my sister to be the trustee. Human beings can be trustees, but we need to ask the question, if I appoint my sister to be a trustee for the monies for my children, can my sister perform the job in the future?
So you're saying that anybody can be a trustee, but one reason why people would go to a company like yours is to make sure that it does happen. It will happen for sure.
Precisely the point, because if I appoint my sister as a trustee, she is also in a way subject to the law, because once I give her the money, she's now legally bound to use the monies for the benefit of my kids.
Right.
I would imagine that that would require some level of expertise. She would have to make sure the monies are invested, safeguarded, and then to respect my wishes to make sure that the monies are given to my children in a reasonable way. I'm not sure my sister can handle the job. That's why we exist.
Since trusts is a kind of transfer of wealth from me to somebody else that I want, right? Why don't I just keep it in a bank? And then, I don't know, write some cryptic letter that only my beneficiary can understand and then can access my bank account. Or I tell the bank, when I die, please give out this money to my wife or whatever.
You could. No. So now you're asking, why don't I just put the money in the bank, and when I die, that my children can just access the bank account directly?
Or the bank will automatically disburse the money.
No, the bank doesn't have such a duty, unless the bank is also a trustee. Because the bank is there just to safeguard the funds in the bank account. They would have to be given instructions, and if they're going to be given instructions, they may need to be a trustee themselves. So you see, you have the person with the money, the person who needs the money. You still need someone to hold on to the money, to listen to your instructions, to follow your instructions. So the bank can do it if it is a trustee, but ordinarily, if you just go to DBS or POSB, they wouldn't be able to do that without being licensed.
I see.
Yes.
Who do you think should own a trust?
Well, I think I'm biased here. I think that first of all, we want to make trusts available to everyone, and I think anyone who can answer this question, and if the answer is yes, you would need to consider a trust. Do you have vulnerable beneficiaries who cannot handle a lump sum?
Who is a vulnerable beneficiary?
My children.
Okay.
My daughter is in her 20s. She may disagree with me. She's married, and I consider her vulnerable in the sense that if I gave her a lump sum like 2 million, 3 million, could she be influenced out of the money? Could she decide not to work and spend the money and stop working because of that lump sum? So in that situation, yes. Now I got my parents. Could I give my mom $1 million? I say no, because some young man may come in to influence her out of the money.
Right. So the vulnerability is not just physical.
That's right.
Right,
That's
but it
right.
could be emotional. It could be cognitive.
It's emotional, it's cognitive, because in the end we are human beings. While I'm here, I can somehow control things, but when I'm not around, I'm not sure what could happen to my daughter. I'm not so sure what could happen to my parents.
This is a multi-part series on trusts as a tool to safeguard your finances. Stay tuned for the next episode. All opinions in this podcast should not be regarded as offering any financial advice. Listeners are encouraged to seek advice from a qualified financial advisor regarding the suitability of any financial strategy, taking into account their specific financial objectives, situation, or particular needs before they act upon any recommendation.